The town had always seemed safe, quiet, and untouched by the darker currents of a world. Neighbors exchanged smiles on their way to work, children played under the watch of street lamps until dusk, and everyone believed that nothing truly sinister could take root in their streets. But behind the neat rows of houses and the manicured lawns, there was a story brewing, one that began with love and ended with blood. It started with Daniel Hayes, a father of two, who had always been known as the kind of man who worked too much but never complained. His daughter, Lily, was his pride. At 16, she was bright, stubborn, and already dreaming of the world beyond their small town. She wanted to study law one day, to fight for justice, as she often reminded her father during their late-night talks in the kitchen. Daniel would smile, hiding the worry that clung to him every time she left the house. One night, Lily didn't come home. At first, Daniel tried to stay calm. Teenagers stayed out late, he reminded himself, convincing his wife that there was nothing to fear. But the hours ticked past, and dread began to settle in the pit of his stomach. When the police were called, they treated it as another case of a runaway. Small towns were good at pretending evil didn't exist. Daniel begged them to look deeper, to listen to him when he said his daughter would never run. His pleas were met with polite shrugs and then silence. Days later, Lily's body was found in a shallow ditch on the edge of town. The news shattered Daniel in a way words could never capture. His wife broke, retreating into a fog of grief, so heavy she could barely rise from bed. Daniel, however, carried his mourning differently. He dressed it in silence, in clenched fists, and in the cold determination that began to creep into his bones. The investigation was slow, the police incompetent or unwilling. Rumors spread in town like wildfire, whispers about boys Lily had turned down, about men who had been seen watching her. Eventually, suspicion fell on a local man with a history of violence, a predator who had long slipped through cracks in the system. His name was never far from Daniel's thoughts. But when the trial came, justice was denied. A lack of evidence, sloppy police work, and a lawyer skilled in twisting doubt left the jury divided. The accused walked free, smirking as if mocking the very idea of accountability. Daniel sat in the courtroom, his daughter's memory burning in his chest, and realized something with horrifying clarity. No one was going to save her. No one was going to give him peace. Justice, if it was to come, would come from his hands. For weeks, Daniel watched the man who had stolen his child. He followed him from bars to alleys, from work to home, learning his patterns the way a hunter studies prey. Sleep became a stranger to him. His wife noticed the change, but said nothing, too lost in her own grief to question the storm building inside him. On a cold night in November, Daniel finally acted. He confronted the man in a dark stretch of road just outside town, a place where no headlights reached and no voices would carry. There were no words exchanged, no dramatic speeches about vengeance or morality. The act was swift, brutal, and fueled by a father's anguish. When it was over, Daniel stood over the lifeless body, breathing hard, a strange calm settling over him. For the first time since Lily's death, he felt something close to relief. But vengeance does not heal. It doesn't bring back what was lost, nor silence the echoes of grief. Daniel returned home, blood still under his fingernails, to a house that remained as broken as before. His wife looked at him with empty eyes, and he realized that nothing he had done could erase her pain, or his own. The police eventually discovered the body, and though suspicion lingered, no one could ever prove Daniel's involvement. The town moved on, whispers fading into memory, but Daniel carried his secret like a chain. Each night he sat at the kitchen table where Lily once dreamed aloud of becoming a lawyer, and he wondered if she would hate him for what he had done, or if she would understand. In the end, Daniel became a ghost of himself. A man hollowed out by tragedy and revenge, left to wander the ruins of a life that once brimmed with laughter. The town still looked safe from the outside, its streets quiet, its houses neat. But for Daniel Hayes, there was no peace, no justice, only the memory of his daughter's smile and the haunting knowledge that revenge had claimed him as much as it had claimed the man he killed. Daniel's story did not end with that night on the lonely road. Revenge has a way of planting seeds that grow in silence, twisting themselves around everything it touches. At first, he thought he had won something back: control, justice, perhaps even a fragment of peace. For weeks after, he would walk through town with a strange stillness in his eyes. People assumed it was grief. They avoided his gaze, murmured condolences, and let him pass without question. But in his heart, he carried the image of the man's final gasp, and though it had brought him satisfaction in the moment, the memory began to rot in his mind. His wife, Marianne, noticed before anyone else. She saw the way he stared at nothing, how his jaw tightened when their son spoke of Lily, how he flinched when sirens echoed through the distance.
She didn't ask. She didn't want to know.
A part of her had suspected what Daniel might do, had perhaps even wanted him to do it, but she could not bring herself to hear it confirmed. Their marriage became a silent pact, her refusal to ask, his refusal to speak. The town, meanwhile, was unsettled. Whispers spread quickly once the man's body was found. Some believed it was divine justice, that Lily's spirit had guided fate. Others said it was Daniel himself. Nobody said it aloud, not in public, but the way people avoided his house told him they suspected the truth. It didn't matter. They wouldn't speak. They knew Lily deserved better than what the law had given her. Still, the police reopened their case. Officers went door to door, knocking softly, asking careful questions. Daniel endured their visits with calm, rehearsed expressions. "I'm just trying to get my wife through this," he told them. "Haven't we suffered enough?" They always left quietly, pity written on their faces, suspicion hidden behind their clipboards. But at night, Daniel wrestled with a different enemy, his own thoughts. He began seeing Lily in his dreams, not as the laughing girl she once was, but as a pale, silent figure. She never spoke, never smiled. Sometimes he woke drenched in sweat, convinced she was standing at the foot of his bed, watching him with eyes that asked a question he could not answer. His son, Matthew, grew angry. At 12, he couldn't understand why his father was so distant. He had lost his sister too, but no one seemed to notice his grief. Daniel, once a devoted father, became absent, consumed by shadows. Matthew would sit alone in his room, wondering why justice meant more to his father than the family he still had left. One night, months after the killing, Daniel sat in the kitchen long past midnight, staring at the empty chair where Lily once studied. He thought of how she had wanted to become a lawyer, to fight for justice the right way. The realization struck him like a blade. He had betrayed her dream. He had taken the very thing she wanted to change, the corruption, the shortcuts, the violence, and made himself a part of it. That knowledge festered. He stopped sleeping. He stopped eating. The quiet man who had once walked into a courtroom and watched his daughter's killer walk free now wandered the house like a ghost, living in the ruins of his own choices. The tragedy of Daniel Hayes was not just that he lost his daughter, nor that he killed the man who took her. It was that revenge left him with nothing, no justice, no peace, no redemption. Just a hollow shell of a father who had once believed in love, in hope, in the promise of a safe town. And though no one ever proved what he had done, everyone seemed to know. The town carried the weight of it in silence, the way small towns always do. They whispered in grocery stores and on sidewalks, teaching their children that some truths were better left unspoken. But the truth lived on in Daniel's eyes, and in the haunting quiet of the home where Lily's laughter no longer echoed. The story became legend in hushed voices, passed from one generation to the next as a warning that grief can turn even the kindest parent into something unrecognizable, and that revenge, once taken, never lets go.